team. And all of us are different in here. Some of us are leaders of churches. Some of us are part of those teams in churches. But let's not forget that actually some of us might be leaders in the future, might be parts of different teams in the future. So whatever level you come to this today, just remember that the Lord, if you're a team member, might make you a leader one day. And so this principle is so important. But I'm going to just start by reading from Exodus. I've been spending a bit of time with Joshua again, and I was taken to this passage when Moses met with his father-in-law. Do you remember this? In Exodus 18. And Moses, as you know, he just led them, the whole of the nation, out of Egypt. And then his father-in-law Jethro comes to meet them in the wilderness at the mountain of God and says, Moses, I'm coming with the crew, come and meet us. And Jethro, you can just imagine him sort of wisely watching as Moses is sharing. And then it comes verse 13 of chapter 18. I'll read this. The next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone? And all the people stand around you, Exodus 18, from morning till evening. And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God, when they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you're doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it alone. Now, obey my voice, I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the law, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure. And all this people also will go on to their place in peace. This is God's word. And it got me thinking, because you look at what Moses did throughout his life. He raised Joshua up, didn't he, as his successor. He saw him on the battlefield that time when his arms are being raised, and I wonder if you could see him on the field just valiantly fighting as a soldier. He obviously was one of the two spies, him and Caleb, that came back full of faith, not fear. And there he was, raised up as his successor in Joshua 1. Those powerful verses that I imagine most of us know really well. You know, take courage, be strong and take courage. Do not veer from the law left or right. But I was reminded of the pain and the deep insecurity of that moment for Joshua. Moses had just died. I imagine he was being prepared for that moment for many years, but then it comes. And goodness me, there it is, that moment. And it's no wonder the Lord has to say to him 3 times, be strong, take courage. Be strong, take courage, I'm with you. And there's some question as to whether Joshua raised up a successor. It's not that explicit, like Moses did with him. That there's elders obviously around him when Joshua died, and they carried on the traditions and the law. But then very quickly the nation of Israel went into decline and destruction, and that's when the judges started coming along because of that. And it just got me thinking about team afresh and how important it is. I have seen in my own experience, but in churches as well, where there isn't team, it soon becomes a lot of things that aren't good. And one of them is the wearing out of the leader. Other things happen as well. We would say that this is one of the most critical steps in the planting loop. So I'd love you as I just take us through the document. There's 3 documents actually, but I'm just going to focus on the main one. I'm just going to skip through it a little bit, and I'm going to finish with 13 questions you should ask yourself for recruiting a team. And I found these questions helpful. So, but I'd love you to listen to this, as you should do every step, as like, this is not information. What do I need to do on the back of this? What is the principles and the actions that I need to go away with? I come to the end of this step, and certainly this step as well, the recruiting team one, and I've got stuff I need to do. But it can feel like an overwhelming task. It's like the most important task, but it's the most overwhelming as well to gather team. But the beautiful thing is, God specialises in answering prayers. He's explicitly asked us to pray. Matthew 9, and he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask therefore the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. And so we must ask. It starts this step with prayer. We must ask the Lord to send workers. It's something that we should be praying every week. So team, who are we talking about when Antioch talks about team? Well, it's important to recognise there's different phases, I think, in the life of an Antioch church plant and the team. And let's remember, Antioch is smaller, replicating churches. So we say that the first, I guess, season of an Antioch church plant, we have what's called a launch team. And this is a small group of people. We sometimes say between 6 and 10, but it's not always that many. A small group of people who have caught the vision for this church plant, and they're going to bear the weight. Did you notice that verse in that passage? These men were people who were going to bear the weight with Moses. And this is a really important first step. There is a difference between team and helpers. I'll say that again, there's a difference between team and helpers, because there are going to be people who are drawn to the vision of what you're doing, especially church planting, because it's quite exciting, church planting. But it's so easy to misidentify a helper as team, because at first glance they can appear like, oh, these guys are really excited about what we're doing here. They're bought into the vision, they're like... But the difference between a helper and a team is a team will bear the weight. A team member will bear the weight. And a helper will help. And I often say helpers just live around the edge, basically. And let's be really clear, it's important to have helpers. This is not a value statement, it's just an identifying who's who in the room, basically. But I think in our experience, in our first church plant, Oldham's Church, we probably began to call people who were helpers team when they weren't team. They never expected to be team. So it's about communication, expectations, like what's going on here, why are you here? And then we got to the point where we're actually saying stop, because there was people, because I'd say there's an extra sphere outside of helpers, and they're called spectators. And certainly at the start of a church plant, there's people who want to come and watch the zoo. And I would say, clearly identify who they are and then tell them to leave. Because they potentially can be unhelpful. Because actually helpers can be helpful to an extent, and we talk about it in the document. Certainly in the early start period of a church, that they bring what we call temporary buzz, helpers. They can bring resources, they can bring connections, but do they bear the weight? Do they bear the weight? And that's why the launch team is often much smaller. It's a smaller group of people, and it's really, really easy to confuse the two. It's much easier to recruit helpers, by the way, and much more difficult to recruit team. Some people will go. We statistically in Antioch, we reckon the attrition rate of any launch team is it's somewhere between 30. John reckons it's closer to 50, but I'm going to be positive. And what I mean by that is people leave the launch team for whatever reason. Something happens, there's an expectation not met, maybe. There's just very natural circumstances that happen that people...
Do you mean percent?
Yeah, percent. Yeah, 30%. So if there's a team of... for us it was actually, with the current church, it was about 25%, so a little less. But for us, that was at the start of this church plant. That was a difficult time. One of our team members who had bought into the vision and was like, I'm in this. Literally the week before we launched, said, I'm done, and left. And it was our church at that point was a disaster zone for about 6 months. Deeply painful. Part of that was a relational breakdown, a marriage breakdown. there was explosions everywhere. I was the closest I've ever been to pressing the red button on ministry, and I've been close to that button a few times. If you're not close to the button in ministry, you're probably not in ministry. But like, I was close to saying, Lord, I'm done. I'll go and be a librarian. Like, this is too painful. But I thank the Lord that we persevered, because I look at our church now and I can see the fruit of persevering through that very painful season. And perseverance in pain is just, it comes daily, doesn't it? You can only do it a day at a time. And there was time in that season where I thought I wasn't going to make it through the day. You know, it was that painful at points. But there is an attrition rate. People will leave your launch team, and if they go, don't take it personally. Yeah. If it's a healthy moving away, bless them. Antioch wants to be a network that sends people out. It's just who we are. So we never want to hold on to people unnecessarily. We want to bless people as they go. Thing we say in the document there, and how did Jesus recruit his team? Well, he called them to himself, didn't he? And then something I say to people who, you know, the season of our church now, we're fairly established new life, this current church, and so, you know, we're up to about 45, 50 people that gather regularly for weekly worship. But I still get people coming along to our church who are mature Christians. And I'm glad to see mature Christians looking at us. But I say to them, when they've come for the second or third week, I say, did Jesus tell you to come here? Did Jesus call you to this? And if the answer is yes, then praise the Lord, let's do this. But if you're just here because we're a snazzy little church plant and you want to see something exciting, I'm not so sure. And that's easier for us because we're smaller churches. We don't handle spectators too easily. We just, partly because in our churches we say to mature Christians, you better start exercising your gifts quickly in here because we haven't really got time. We're here for introducing lost people to Jesus, not propping up whatever your needs might be. You've got to exercise your gifts in this place. Get on with doing summit. I remember once in one of my churches, not a church that I was leading, it was actually Phil Rawlins' church. Someone came for the first week and they were a mature Christian and they were playing keyboard in the worship that Sunday. It's like, wow, that's quickly exercising someone's gifts. So, but Jesus called them to himself, didn't he? He said, come and follow me. That's what he said to those disciples. And interestingly, he didn't recruit apostles, he recruited disciples, didn't he? It's so easy to look at the people that are in front of you and think, not these lot, this is someone else. But it's not the way Jesus did it. A guy called Philip Mitchell that Peter's introduced me, a preacher from America. He's a very good preacher. I recommend you listening to him. He did something the other week and he says, you know, Jesus knew what he was getting when he called me. He knew all my foibles and my sin, but he saw the potential that I have in him. And it's the same for our team. There was a point where we started to gather our team for this church, and some of you heard this story, but we were prayer walking regularly, and then we gathered in this house, and that's what we do on this regular rhythm for 6 months. And then I came to the evening of the ask. Like I was like, I'm going to do the ask. I'm going to ask people to sign up to be part of this thing to plant church. And I gave my ask. It was really good, I've got to say. It was like really clear, really like gentle but clear. Like, and nobody was in, and not one person in the room was in. I was like, Jesus, did you just see that? The Holy Spirit, you're like, you got this, didn't you? Yeah. So what's next then? Like, but what was interesting, the team came from a blind spot, and it's often the Lord will do this to keep us humble, and to prove His sovereignty and His perfect will. But that's just a helpful reminder to me, and actually in all of church life, you know, who are on the blind spots. So, and therefore, team is a community. It's a family, isn't it? That's right. Communication is so important. I'm skipping through a bit now. Power dynamics in church planting teams. We have to listen. We have to express expectations as the leader and as the team member, because people will come into the church with expectations, with previous experiences. This is how we did it in this church over here, maybe. Are they asking for power, or are they offering to serve? It's a key thing to look for. Someone's character emerges in time. We've just had a leadership retreat in our church, just come back from it 2 hours ago, and we were talking about 2 of our guys are moving on from our leadership team. So sending them out, but we're going to need to replace them in our leadership team. And, there's lots of names that come into our mind. Well, they're really gifted, but then we reminded ourselves, this is character. This is someone whose character, who's in the secret place, submitted to Jesus. They're the people we want to consider and pray for this leadership team. It's so tempting to be swayed by gifting. You've got to listen to the Lord. Actually, fasting is so important in that, isn't it? It's a New Testament principle for choosing leaders, isn't it? I don't know if many of us are fasting in January, but yeah, if not, do it. And then there's some other things in the document, like the 5 virtues of team that we think are really important: love, clarity, faith, humility, and service. So 30 questions. This is what I've come up with that I find helpful, and these are pretty much all common sense. 30 questions. Number 1. Just see what I put.
Yeah, you're both.
Right, that's fine. Number 1, think about other teams you've seen and been part of. How were they gathered? What worked? What didn't work? It's a really important question to think about the teams that didn't quite work, or just had trip-ups along the way, because they're important lessons, aren't they? What was going on there in that particular team? Number 2, how are you going to pray for God to send team? The harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. A great recruitment technique is to involve people in what you're doing. Get potential team people to pray with you. Get potential team people to do evangelism with you on the streets. Just get people exposed to your culture, and see what happens. Number 3, how are you going to network? Networking might come naturally to you, maybe not so naturally. I'm not a natural networker. I don't love it, if I'm honest. But it's actually really important. Most healthy teams I've been part of have been gathered through relational links. People that know this person and that person. So where are you looking? Where are the networks that you need to connect with? And if you're new to a place, who are the people you need to get to know to engage with those networks? You don't know what you don't know, so get out there and get to know networks. 4, vision. Who are you? And is it clearly expressed? How can you be clear about what it is you're doing? What is your personal calling? What's the Lord asking you to do with your church? What's the vision? The question of vision is, why should I join you in your church? Do a vision evening. We found these really helpful. Just an evening where we gather people who are exploring what we're about, and just set out really clearly what it is you're about. Number 5, what cold-faced ministry can you invite potential launch team people into? This is a really key way to recruit. Certainly street evangelism and other sort of outreach ministries. Number 6, as you build your team, in some cases the team will change. How will you communicate commitment timeframes? So for us now, often just to talk about how an Antioch church plant often works is you'll start with a launch team here, and then you launch. So you're into a new phase where the church has been launched. And so what often happens, not always, but the launch team will dissolve here because there's a small community now gathered. So if you have 6 people in your launch team and 4 other people join your church, it's slightly odd to be doing meetings as there's 6 people when there's 4 people stood here thinking, what's going on? Everybody knows that you 6 were the people who launched this church. They know that there's something about the Lord calling you 6 to do it. But at that point, it's worth exploring whether you dissolve as a launch team. And what we called a new life, we said everybody's team, just for this period. Everybody's stepping up in some sense. Now, clearly, that's not stepping up to everything. Leading services, preaching God's word is not for everybody that just walks through the door. But there's a sense of it's a small community at this point. But what you're doing as a leader is aiming towards what I call a leadership team then. And this is much more common, like New Testament principle and eldership, that's surrounding the leader. And by this point you're slowly growing, and so about 18 months ago at New Life we got to this point where we prayed and fasted about who might be on this leadership team, and so there was some people who were on the launch team that became part of the leadership team, but not everybody. And then you communicate that clearly, and by this point the church is a little bigger, so they're wanting to know who the leadership team are. They're wanting to know where the anchor sits. They know it's you because if you're the leader, of course they do, but it's so important to have this leadership team. And then there's obviously we're all at different stages here. And what's interesting about this leadership team, we put time frames in that. We said to the leaders, you're on a year. Every year we review this. We say, is the Lord still calling you to be a leader here in this church? And you could probably put that in throughout the life of any team, actually. Just a little side note on stepping people down from leadership is deeply painful, but there might be times when you have to do it. If we're a New Testament church, there's times when we might have to step people down. Talk to me later about that one if you want. Number 7, a small team that is together and focused is more common in Antioch than a larger team. How does this help frame your thinking as you seek to build and gather a team? It's certainly in the church planting world, we hear HTB and we think we've got to gather 30 to 50 people to be part of the team. It's just not the reality for most churches. And a small, even just 3 people, I would say, who are bearing the weight, that is so powerful. That's so powerful in the life of the church. And number 8, who are your helpers? Identifying who they are. Why are they here? How are you keeping differentiation between helpers and team? And remember to identify just the FOMO Christians who are just floating around. I like this quote when I'm thinking about people who are floating around. President Roosevelt said this: "It's not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong man or woman stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who's in the arena, whose face is marred with dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he or she fails, at least fails while daring greatly." It's so easy to listen to people in the stands, isn't it? But I've just got to a thing now where I'm just like, I'll listen to you if you're on the field with me. Or another analogy, if you're in no man's land with me, then we're good. You're my brother and sister. But if you're in the stands, I'm probably not going to listen to pay much attention to what it is you're saying. Number 9, your launch team will not necessarily be your leadership team, what I just talked about here. Number 10, expectations. How can you communicate these healthily and honestly, yours and theirs? Number 11, how are you going to build a culture of family? One thing we would add to that list of virtues is fun. It's something that I talk about a lot, but church needs to be fun as well. It needs to be laughter and joy. It gets so serious so quick doing church, and so fun is a key thing actually. When did you last laugh? Number 12, who are you missing? Who's on the periphery? As you look around and you see the life of your team or church, where the gifts missing, where the different spiritual gifts even missing. I'm not talking about wackos becoming part of your church. I'm just talking about where are the holes. What is it you need, and what do you think the Lord needs to provide, and then ask for it. And then the last one, did I mention, is how you're going to pray. It's so important. And as I finish, I just feel like we'll do a bit of question and answers if you've got any. I was reminded that actually, as the leader of a church, one of the primary jobs as a leader to recruit a team, to gather team, to lead team. But actually, it's not just the role of the leader; it's the role of any team actually to always be thinking who should be on this team. So it's everybody's job actually to be thinking about how we gather in team, because not just least for the current church that you're in, because in Antioch we talk about the next church. So who is it that you have eyes on that could not necessarily be part of the leadership team or the launch team for this church, but for the next one, or maybe for the one after that? You know, there's this role of recruiting team and gathering team is all of our jobs as mature followers of Jesus. We're not spectators, and we've got a a job to do. But thankfully, it's all in the Lord's hand. We have to come to him because it's a massive job, this. Talk to us next year.